It's The World This Week. The World This Week in partnership with The Daily Beast. Joining us from New York City, Noor Ibrahim, international news editor at The Daily Beast. How are you?
Very good. How about you?
Not so bad, not so bad. It's gray here in Paris. I hope it's better over in Gotham. Richard Verlier is with us, France correspondent for the Swiss news website Blick. How are things?
Good evening, Francois. Fine.
She is the one who cracks the whip at the Russian language service of sister station Radio France International. Elsa Vidal, news director, how are you?
I'm fine, thank you.
Good that you're fine. Is Sarah Bertelsen fine, senior producer here at France 24?
Hello. All good.
All good.
All good.
All good. Okay.
January's almost over.
January's almost over. You could listen, like, and subscribe to The World This Week on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and other fine streaming services. Ukraine hawks had accused Germany's chancellor of dithering. Now, will history instead remember a leader who drove a hard bargain? On Wednesday, Olaf Scholz finally telling the German parliament that he would do like the hashtag said and free the Leopards, the initial batch of that workhorse of European tanks bound for Ukraine in a milestone moment for a nation adverse to conflict zones since World War II. Scholz's announcement timed in lockstep with the one out of Washington. Joe Biden relenting and promising a battalion's worth of U.S.-made Abrams tanks, while downplaying reports of testy conversations of late between allies.
Yesterday, Mark, I'm grateful to Chancellor Scholz for providing German Leopard 2 tanks and will lead an effort to organize a European contribution of 2 tank battalions for Ukraine. I want to thank the Chancellor for his leadership and his steadfast commitment to our collective efforts to support Ukraine. Germany has really stepped up. The Chancellor has been a strong voice for unity, a close friend, and for the level of effort we're going to continue.
Germany has really stepped up, Elsa Vidal.
Yes.
Your thoughts when you heard that?
Well, my first thoughts were that it has not taken that long, actually, to have Germany joining the Allies in this endeavor, and that probably we are witnessing a tremendous time for Europe when we could overcome all obstacles that seem to be on our way for the last decades. And the war in Ukraine, I would say, has been an extreme catalyst for us to come together as a political union and not only an economic market. So I think all hesitation, all the negotiation that has...
When you say a political union, do you mean
Europe, finally. Yes. I know we can discuss the situation with the US, and there is many things to be said about it, but still, I think we have come a long way forward, and it's quite a good thing that we did not rush to say yes in a second to this, to the demand, to the request of Mr. Zelensky. It took some time, but finally we came to an agreement, and it's all for the best of Europe, I think.
All for the best of Europe, but he waited on the Americans. And the Americans, when it comes to the military effort, Richard Verlier, are the ones driving this. I mean, they made announcements this week, like, for instance, they're going to double the amount of ammunition that they produce over the next 2 years. They're ready to roll out more F-16s.
Well, you've got to understand where Olaf Scholz is coming from. His party, the SPD, the Social Democrat Party, is clearly the more pacifist party in the coalition. I mean, they have never been in favor of war, and traditionally in recent German history, they have been always looking east, the SPD. So it makes sense that, first of all, it took time for him to convince his own party. And secondly, it makes sense that he asked in a kind of US cover before taking the decision. That's what he wanted. He wanted to be alongside the US because that was probably the best argument he could find to deliver those Leopard tanks, knowing that the German tanks apparently will be there in Ukraine, in the ground, much before the American tanks. So it's more symbolic than something else, but he didn't want to move alone. He wanted the, let's say, big brother or father USA to go, and he wanted to be alongside.
At the end of the day, Noor Ibrahim, Europe's defense still relies on the United States.
Yeah, I mean, I think the fact that no one really just wanted to go this alone. No one wanted to be the first country to take that step, which is a really massive step. And I think what we saw this week was the seal being broken in a way. And I'd argue that that's part of a larger pattern that we're seeing where weapons that were considered a red line only months ago are now getting the green light. And it seems to be moving continuously in that direction where that line in the sand keeps moving towards Ukraine's favor. And I think that's something that's probably going to continue as this war grinds on. And any military weapons expert will tell you that it is a game changer, especially considering the state of Russian tanks. It's something that I think the Kremlin, they might be trying to project a cool facade on the outside, but I have no doubt that there's a lot of panic happening.
Yeah, Nora,
behind closed doors.
as the war approaches its first anniversary, both sides have dug in. Talk of spring offensives coming from each side, and you have had the Daily Beast this week reporting that Russia's building up fortifications all along the front, really, all the way up from near the border down to Kherson. Noor Ibrahim? All right, we seem to have lost the connection there. But yeah, the tanks are essential. Just a word on Olaf Scholz here. Germans, as was said by Richard, they voted for the Social Democrat to succeed Angela Merkel, even though his bland and on-message stubbornness had earned the Chancellor the moniker of Scholzomat. Critics called his caution prevarication and even turned it into a verb, Scholzing, yes. A term he revisited with glee in an interview Thursday with German public broadcaster ZDF.
The citizens want someone to govern who doesn't let himself be impressed by that and follows the course that is responsible for our country, for securing peace in Europe and also for our own security. And that means that we proceed in a coordinated way with others and that we do it. And as I said, the translation of Scholzing is Germany does the most.
So, Sarah Bertelsen, 3 cheers for Scholzing, as described by the Chancellor?
No, well, I think that Scholz, I mean, he's at the head of a coalition. He has a party that's been reluctant, as I said, to any kind of war. But it's also the German population that is very hesitant to this kind of weapons delivery. I saw a report saying that 4 out of 10 Germans believe that there is a real risk of retaliation, either on Germany or on another European country or the US. Well, that's further away. But if the West is upping its arms delivery, so there's a real fear, and I mean he had to deal with that too.
Did he surprise you? Like, did your view of Olaf Scholz change this week?
After he made the decision? No, not really. We felt it coming, when he started saying that you could start training your soldiers on these tanks. I mean, I think everyone felt that it was going to come, but they were waiting for the US to go hand in hand with them.
So they moved in tandem, but still, before the decision, everyone was like, especially countries like Poland, the Baltic states, were like, why are the Germans dragging their feet? And now it seems like, he managed to twist the Americans' arms.
Twist, I'm not so sure. I think, of course, he got the delivery of the Abrams tanks, but it's going to take months. So the thing I can say is that he wanted to be under the umbrella of the US and that Western allies would approach this decision all together, which I think is a very good signal to send to the Russian leaderships, because most of the influence that Russia is having in Europe, and not to speak of the US, is because they have this narrative that we are weak and divided. So when we succeed in bringing a coalition's answer, even if it requires more time, even if we seem to be hesitating and not to agree within ourselves, it's good if after 1 week we have consulted each other and came to one answer. Of course, we don't have the same perception of what should a leader do and how fast he should take decision. In France, we love it when it's quick and fast, but we speak a lot and we don't implement our decision as quick as we pronounce the words. Whereas in Germany, people seem extremely cautious and a little bit dull. There is not a charismatic leader in Germany, but the results are there. And so far, we are going together. Instead of competing for leadership at once, we are together. So I think it's good. It doesn't look sexy, but it's good.
And the next step, Richard Verly is going to announce it now, is that that Franco-German tank program that's been in the pipeline for I don't know how many years, and that never seems
There are two weapon systems for the future, Franco-German, who are now in the pipeline. You have one jet fighter. It's called jet fighter.
Should I hold my breath? Should I hold my breath?
I think they will do it because they have no other way at the moment to deliver European-made weapon than to be together. So one system is the fighter jet, and the other system is the battle tank of the future. But one thing I wanted to say, we tend in the media, we like the drama, we love the drama, and we focused on Scholz. But if you look carefully, about 10 days ago already, the vice chief minister in Germany, the vice president of the government, already said that Germany would probably open the door to Poland to deliver tanks. So I think part of this was a bit of show, political tactic by Scholz to delay. So he appears as a strong leader, one who can resist the past. But in reality, I believe decision was made.
All right, Elsa Vidal talking about the Russian narrative. Let's take a listen. While Scholz and Biden were approving tanks, Vladimir Putin Wednesday was meeting university students in Moscow, offering up a history lesson on a post-war Germany where he says the Soviets left, but not the Americans.
И, строго говоря, формально и юридически
And strictly speaking, in a legal sense, it's US occupation forces that are on the territory of the Federal Republic of Germany. And that's what's happening. There's a lot of them there. And German politicians themselves say that Germany has never been a sovereign state in the full sense of the word. A lot of what is happening has deep roots and certain foundations. Of course, the time will come, and there's no doubt about it, when Europe will somehow restore its sovereignty.
Суверенитет будет возвращен Европе.
Free Europe. Sarah Bertelsen.
I think this somewhat is quite incredible because especially when you see how... So now suddenly he starts talking history and claiming that Germany is not a sovereign state. We see no more threats about Russia hitting back at Europe for any tank deliveries, etc. So I really don't know where he's going with this, but it's. I thought it was incredible that he didn't immediately start threatening the countries that now are selling the weapons.
Elsa Vidal.
It's because the play has been rewritten and now is a good cop versus bad cops. Bad cops are on TV and they are again threatening to create a full island of both London, Paris, even Madrid now, and to eradicate any living soul there. But Vladimir Putin on this day, it's a very peculiar day. It's the Students' Day. So he plays as a very, almost a father figure, and he is giving advice. And yeah, he seems very far away from any war. But I think it's also because they want to reactivate this line that Europe is under an American dominion, which is also very active in France, because we say, well, the European defense is fading away. Germany is buying its planes from the US. Where will we go together? We will be endlessly under the influence of the US. But the thing is, under a short term, we have no choice. If we want to have a external defense policy at some day, we need to go through this door, even though it means for now some more domination of the US defense industry. In the long run, yes, we will be opposed.
Noor Ibrahim, where you are in the U.S., have people made that sort of switch in their minds to a peacetime world to a wartime world? Ukraine is far away from where you are.
I think people are mostly just focused on the ongoing violence and the fact that there just doesn't seem to be any foreseeable end to it. I think it comes in waves where we'll have periods where, Ukraine seems to be making all of these gains at a very rapid pace. And there's hope. There looks like there's hope at the end of the tunnel. And then other waves where, the Russians manage to seize more territory and plan some kind of rebound. And I think right now it's a very critical time overall. I think both sides are expecting some kind of major assault to happen, especially as the weather conditions improve. And I think that's why the news of the tank's delivery at this moment is so critical, because it is a time where it could really go in either direction. And something like that is definitely news that could tip the scale in one direction or the other. So that's kind of the sentiment that is here. But I think what people are mostly kind of focusing on too is kind of this unraveling of Putin and this new suppressed wave, but a wave definitely happening in Russia where you have leaks here and there of a lot of people being more vocal about how they actually feel about Putin, how they actually feel about this war. Even his own state media right now is being a lot more forward with their opinions on the military strategy that's been used. So there's been a lot of focus on that end too, of like where will Putin end up at the end of this? That's pretty much the feeling here.
Where it will end up, and while allies go all in, Ukraine's president was conducting this week an anti-corruption purge. Among the sackings and resignations, that of the deputy head of Ukraine's presidential office, here you see him, Kyrylo Tymoshenko. This was for domestic reasons. Richard Verly, our correspondent, telling us that the press in Ukraine said, look, we can't keep this under wraps longer. But there was also the timing of it, showing at a time when you're asking for foreign money that you're willing to crack down on and fire regional governors.
Well, if they resigned, it's because there was a problem. And there is a corruption problem. Oh, yeah. And everybody is aware of the corruption problem. It's been there in many reports. It's been there if you listen to political leaders from Europe who are all worried about sending a lot of money to Ukraine and losing track of that money. So first of all, the problem existed. Secondly, Zelensky once again proves that he acts swiftly. So he has the authority. I think for him it's very important to show that he is the man in charge. And that's why some of his very close advisors finally resign. And finally, as you said, it's very timely as it comes right when a new wave of weapon, but not only weapon, a new wave of financial aid is coming to Ukraine. Just a word on Putin. I guess the images we've seen are images from the Russian TV, I'm sure. And it shows that in this communication war that we've seen from the beginning, Russia is improving. Clearly, you have Putin. You've seen a very pretty student, by the way. The camera is focusing on her. You have Putin, who has, a jacket, kind of businessman attitude, very cool. Not the type of Putin we saw behind his desk, sitting when he was doing his declaration. So don't underestimate Russia, the capacity of Russia to come strong in this communication war. And we all know it's very important.
Yeah, well, yes, they are adjusting. I think there is constant feedback from spin doctors around Putin. But for having watched the whole sequence that lasts almost 1 hour and a half, you have also these typical of the Soviet time moments when you have a young man, really not nice looking, by the way, who presents himself, I don't know who he is in reality, but who presents himself.
Because in the past there's been the accusation that it's actors who've been
staged most of the time.
Okay.
And so this young man says that he comes from Luhansk, so one of the so-called sovereign republic of Donbass, which is actually pieces of Ukraine that have been torn apart thanks to special agents of the Russian operatives. So he says it comes from there, that he has been taking arms against the Ukraine government, and that now, in order to serve his country better, he wants to join the FSB, that is the Russian Secret Service. And then Vladimir Putin answers that now certainly this young man is different from the man he was before serving because he has had a gun in his hand and he risked his life, which is interesting because Vladimir Putin never fought a war. So, but he was portraying himself as a fighter, so and giving some kind of paternalistic tune to it. So I don't know if it's really
You make him sound like
they
Uncle
are
Joe.
trying. Yes, exactly. It's terrible.
All right. The war in Ukraine inviting itself to Melbourne Park. While Serbia's Novak Djokovic is through in straight sets to the final of the Australian Open tennis tournament, his dad flying home after posing with pro-Putin fans who had flouted a ban by organizers on Russian and Belarusian flags at the tournament. Sarah Bertelsen, your thoughts on this story? Is it just the guy in the wrong place at the wrong time?
I don't know if I have a lot of opinions about this. Yes, probably. Should we care about the father of Djokovic? I don't know. Huh?
Yeah, should we?
Should we? No, that's my question.
No, but we should care about Djokovic himself. And Djokovic has always been very Serb, very nationalistic, and I'm not surprised that this is happening.
After losing her women's doubles semifinals, this might be the answer to Sarah's question. Ukraine's Marta Kostyuk said that the flags upset her. She refused to opine on whether Djokovic himself, though, is to blame.
No matter what I say, I'm going to be hated till the rest of my life, especially by very aggressive Novak's fans. Because, I mean, people know that a lot of, not everyone, but Novak has very aggressive fans. Because I know this, because I experienced this in the past.
So, Noor Ibrahim, should we care about whether Novak Djokovic's father poses with these pro-Putin fans? Noor Ibrahim, can you hear me?
No.
All right, we seem to have a problem there again with the link with New York. We'll try to reconnect with that. Apologies. Moving on, is it all down to one radical's attention-seeking behavior? Turkey's political class unanimous in denouncing a Quran burning by Danish-Swedish activist Rasmus Paludan. This at a rally last weekend. It was enough for Turkey to suspend talks to lift its objections to Sweden and neighboring Finland joining NATO.
The ugly demonstration in Sweden is an insult first and foremost to Muslims and to everyone who respects individual fundamental rights and freedoms. The fact that this vile attack against the Quran took place in front of the Turkish embassy makes this both a religious and a national issue for us.
Sarah Bertelsen, Turkey's already summoned now, preemptively, the Danish ambassador, because that same provocateur says he's going to do the same this coming weekend in Copenhagen.
Yes, it's his thing, so to say. Paludan it's not the first time he's burned the Quran, he's done it before. It's part of his, he's a troublemaker. And he has, last year he created riots in Sweden because he went to Stockholm suburbs and did the same thing. But this time, but I think that for Denmark and Turkey, the relation, of course, isn't as tense as it is between Sweden and Turkey and Finland and Turkey at the moment. So I doubt that it will have many consequences. However, what happened in Sweden will definitely have consequences.
What do Swedes think about it? I mean, is it on par with when you had the cartoons in Charlie Hebdo of the Prophet?
What happened was when Paludan came into to the Stockholm suburbs last year, that created a lot of tension and feelings, and people are very upset, and there were a lot of discussions of whether he should have the right to do this act or not. When it came to the burning outside of the Turkish embassy, there was very little debate. There were very few people outside. It didn't create any massive feelings, etc. I think people see Paludan as a bit. It's not a joke, but because what he does has serious consequences. But he's not taken seriously. And in this case, with burning, it was so clearly a provocation, and sorry, that doesn't really have any impact on the Swedish population directly, so they didn't really care about it.
Even if the Quran hadn't been burned, chances were slim, right, Richard Verly, that Turkey would suddenly turn around and approve Sweden's NATO bid when there's elections coming up, elections which have been moved up to May the 14th.
Erdogan has to put up a fight on that with Sweden for political reason. I mean, he has to show that whatever happens in NATO depends on Turkey, and he has to show it to its own population, to its own party. And in that situation, Sweden is kind of the perfect case because it harbors Kurdish community, and we know the grievances between Erdogan and the Kurdish community. What I believe is if you look at it strategically speaking, it doesn't make a difference. If today Sweden would be attacked by Russia, NATO would probably consider it as an attack on the organization. So the fact that the integration of Sweden within NATO has already been signed during a NATO summit, though it has not been ratified. I mean, progresses have been made. So it's a political show, and I believe if Biden and if other leaders do not intervene, it's probably because they know it's a show and they don't consider that at the moment it's really empowering the alliance from a military point of view.
Nonetheless, spare a thought for Finland and its NATO membership bid. The foreign minister who spoke on the day Helsinki pledged its own German-made Leopard tanks for Ukraine.
Of course, we have seen recently totally unnecessary provocations, and those who are guilty for these provocations, of course, are playing with the security of Finland and Sweden and about the time, with the timetable of our NATO accession.
So, Elsa Vidal, what does Finland do? Does it press force with the ratification separate from Sweden, or do we go back to that unity you were talking about earlier?
No. They are definitely considering going forward on their own. I think it's also a big step forward. And as in Germany, in Finland, people are very divided about it because both Russia and Sweden have had such a tremendous impact on the Finland history and Finland has been pursuing a neutrality position for decades, that they have moved out from this line and now they are ready to join the alliance, the NATO alliance, whether it's without or with Sweden. But it's going to be extremely downplaying this decision is going to be very hard for the government to support if Sweden is not behind, because Finland has an extremely long border with Russia and it feels extremely threatened. Having Sweden just behind and within NATO, it would have been much more comforting. Nowadays they are moving ahead, but I must say also it's because Sweden has been opposing much more resistance to Erdogan demands on Kurdish community, whereas Finland has been more compliant.
And there's another outlier in this, by the way, Sarah Bertelsen. Hungary has yet to finish ratifying those applications.
Yes, and some are saying that Erdogan is waiting for Hungary to ratify the membership as well. But what's interesting to see is that in Sweden, people seem to be pretty sure that once the May election is done and over, Turkey will ratify Sweden.
The next NATO summit is in July in Vilnius, in Lithuania, so you can expect then this issue to be resolved, I believe.
And speaking, just to say, because you spoke about the US implication in this, Turkey wants to buy the F-16s from the US, and US did say earlier this month that they are possibly they're very likely to sell the planes to Turkey. So, once this whole thing all comes together, elections, F-16s, I think they will sign.
All right, a bit more patience then for those Nordic nations. It's more than enough to put the Middle East on edge. Protests at Jerusalem's Al-Aqsa Mosque compound this Friday after Thursday's firefight between Islamic Jihad militants and Israeli special forces resulted in the deadliest West Bank raid in 2 decades. This is Al-Aqsa, where just weeks ago, Benjamin's far-right security minister went for a stroll in a move that stoked tensions. 9 killed in the Jenin-Palestinian refugee camp Thursday. It was followed by rocket attacks between Israel and Gaza. There were no casualties there, but the Palestinian Authority had, in the meantime, weighed in.
In light of the repeated aggression against our people and the flouting of signed agreements, including security ones, we consider that security coordination with the Israeli occupation government no longer exists as of now.
Noor Ibrahim, this Friday, our correspondent describing what she called a deceptive calm, perhaps. Everybody's very much on edge. In fact, we've just gotten breaking news of a gunman in Jerusalem wounding 5 people in one neighborhood before he was shot. There's the feeling that it's a tinderbox right now.
It absolutely is. And if it doesn't explode in a big way right now, it'll happen next month or the month after that or the month after that. The fact is, this is a problem that's rooted in an illegal occupation. And I don't think any of these incidents are going to go away until that core issue is addressed. And it's the same cycle that we've been seeing year after year. And I think the most important takeaway from that right now is the fact that there just will never be a point where we can breathe easy and have any real semblance of peace without those core issues being addressed. It's a tinderbox, but it's one that pops up every year and will continue to pop up.
This year, the calendar is particularly treacherous, Noor, what with Ramadan coming up, and it's coming up at the same time as Easter and Passover.
Yes, and I think that, if I had to take a guess, we'd be at the brink of another big uprising. And that's the problem here. There will always be resistance for as long as there is an occupation. And, I think what is important to absorb from that situation is the fact that we're noticing a pattern, especially from the Israeli government's part, of the reasoning and the excuses that they're using. It's curious to me that with every incident like this, there's these mistakes that keep happening where, you're mistaking a medic or a journalist with a militant, or with what happened in Jenin recently. There's accusations that there was attacks near a hospital. I do not understand the mental gymnastics that people have to jump through to somehow blindly believe any of these issues or any of these cycles will end without addressing the core problem. And that includes the U.S. It includes the U.S. It includes the narrative that the U.S. has been putting out, just not really turning a blind eye and just being willfully blind about the entire situation. It just feels like we're having the same exact conversation every single time here.
Yeah, the situation, though, is, by the way, it's now 10 wounded, according to the French news agency AFP, and some of those in critical condition. It's in East Jerusalem. There was where that happened.
And who are they, the wounded people? Are they Palestinians?
We're just getting news now. We don't have more yet. I want to ask you, Richard Verly, when you heard there Noor talking about it, you still have, for the time being, the U.S., I know the CIA director was there this Friday. Next week, they're expecting the U.S. Secretary of State. They're trying to pave the way for a visit by Joe Biden, trying to keep it together. but we seem to be headed towards a new kind of spiral.
Well, look at the situation. You know, there is, Noor was talking about pattern. There is a tragic pattern. Whenever the world is busy with a big issue somewhere, always the Middle East is getting into flames. It's getting into flames because very often the Israeli government use that opportunity to pressure more, to put more pressure on the occupied territory. And with this specific government, Netanyahu, that's exactly what you can expect. Second thing you have to keep in mind is the situation of Netanyahu himself. You know, he's under, let's say, under the eyes of justice, again, for corruption and so on. So he will find, and he will try to find whatever escape way he can to divert the attention of the population. And then you have the presence of the extreme right within his government, and they are clearly for, a fight. Let's put it this way, they are in favor of a fight with the Palestinians. So if you take those three elements, I don't see how even Biden at the moment could calm it down, because Biden is busy with other problems. And does he have the leverage at the moment? I'm not too sure, because America and even Ukraine is in need of some Israeli weaponry, Israeli surveillance system. So the Israelis know at the moment they probably have the upper hand and they can use it.
It's increasing tension coming, and you have a situation where he's got the far right that Richard was talking about, that he's trying to keep inside the tent of his coalition, and at the same time the opposition, which is planning more and more demonstrations.
Yeah, it's true, but I think the Israeli society has been extremely resilient to division, although it's more and more polarized, and it's also a matter of generation. And the thing I cannot help thinking of is that if we don't support Ukraine strong enough, and if we cannot break the aggression that Russia has been launching, we may very well, within 10 years, be witnessing the same situation in Ukraine as we witness now in the West Bank and in Gaza. It means people being under occupation, being pushed to desperation, and tension spiraling out of control, because usually when Russia creates or launched a conflict in its border zone, the zone it considers as its natural influence zone, it doesn't bring it to an end. It keeps it. It keeps it because this way it provides Russia with a leverage that it can use when it needs it for any other international negotiation. So what we see there in Palestine and in Israel, we could foresee it very soon. And if we cannot find the leverage, whether through negotiation or through war, to bring an end, and a real end, a political end, to this war in Ukraine. It's typically towards this situation that we are going.
Sarah Bertelsen?
Yeah, I was following this story yesterday, and what was quite incredible was the soundbite from the interview that the Ben-Gvir, the minister of the...
This is the far-right security minister.
Exactly. Gave yesterday, where he was after... So 9 people dead, 2 civilians killed, and he was hailing the intervention by the forces and saying that this was an incredible success, and had no words, not one word, for the civilian casualties, which is, I think, a very, very sad show of where this government, unfortunately, is standing.
All right. The difficulty then of the Middle East, and whether it's an endless conflict, we're confronted every day with questions on a more existential level about just how expendable we all are. In the 1968 science fiction classic Space Odyssey, the spaceship computer HAL stages a coup against the humans on board. Well, just this week, we have a survey that was done, news of a survey that was done by a professor at the Wharton School of Business, saying how he had used a ChatGPT-3, running that artificial intelligence chatbot, getting a passing grade at the University of Pennsylvania's Business School, one of the best in the world. It would have been a B to B minus grade on the exam. It has important implications, he says, for business school education. It sounds like it's got important implications for the future of humanity and whether we're all replaceable, Noor Ibrahim. We seem to have a problem with the connection there again with New York City. We'll try to reconnect. Elsa Vidal.
Yeah, well, you know, it comes a long way. I remember when I was a student, automatic translations were really being discussed, and nowadays I'm using myself sometimes apps that translate automatically. And
Telegram, which automatically translates a lot of the channels we were able to follow along.
That's not the one I'm using, but yes, that's the principle. And of course, it's getting closer and closer to be as good as humans. But I was wondering, for the education purposes, whether it would be a good opportunity maybe to focus more on the oral and speaking talents, speaking skills, so that people would not only deliver papers that could be written by their mums or friends, but would be obliged or to deliver a live speech and be in front of their teacher. And maybe also we could all go back to schools and pass our exam in one room with paper and pencil. That would be interesting. But there will always be people cheating on. It's the part of the education.
Always be people cheating. Let's listen perhaps to what one college professor had to say in her reaction to the emergence of ChatGPT-3.
I think a lot of people were really, really worried about keeping students from cheating. I personally am more concerned about making sure that the students who deserve an A get an A than making sure that the students who don't deserve an A don't get an A.
That logic, Sarah Bertelsen?
Possibly. Let's say. I'm not going to say how many tests I cheated on, but yes. But people will always cheat. Yes, but I think there will be there are negative effects, of course, of this, but there are also possibilities. I mean, I think we also need to see the opportunities that this new technology is offering. And I just want to say, because there's been a lot of tests. We've read articles written by the GPT. There have been speeches written, etc., and they're all quite decent. I mean, they're not excellent, but they're decent. But there's one thing, and it can't do, and it cannot make a proper joke.
Humor.
It cannot make a proper joke. So I think that, there are limits to it. So comedians will forever be needed.
Yeah, earlier this month, the Daily Beast spoke with a Princeton University student who'd come up with a program to rat out term papers written with ChatGPT. Said one reassuring computer science professor, besides the glitches and factual errors, what's worse, and this is Sarah's point, is that it's also boring. The syntax is simple. There's no style or flair. Quote, the idea that you could replace humans, I think it's still fanciful. It's still fanciful. Noor Ibrahim, I'm a little nervous here because one day maybe it will be possible.
I think it's far from here. I mean, the fact is human beings created this invention. Like every invention, it can be used for good or bad. And I think if we can make something like this, then we have the ability to keep it in check. So I'm not worried about it. I don't expect any robot apocalypse anytime soon. So that's my 2 cents.
Right. Well, some people are banking on it. Microsoft, while it's laid off 10,000 workers recently, it's invested $10 billion on ChatGPT, getting a leg up on its rival Google. Richard Valli, this is a table full of journalists. We all remember a few years back when I think it was Yahoo, I'm not sure, who tried to replace journalists with automated articles, and they had to releg because it didn't work.
Well, contrary to Noor, but it might be a question of age. I am worried. Because we do not know until where this type of software will go. And it could really not only destroy jobs, that's what it is doing at the moment, artificial intelligence, but it can destroy lives. because at some point students might get tricked by these AI software. They may rely too much on them. Then they may be disappointed because university will use software to detect those who are using ChatGPT and other. So I believe it's a trap, and it's a dangerous trap. So we should be very careful and certainly not take it lightly.
But this is something that's been said about every major invention. If you look back at newspapers, you look back decades, they said the same exact thing about the internet. They said the same exact thing about any new technology. And yes, I agree there are pitfalls there, but as long as you keep up with the regulations, and yes, there will be a learning curve and mistakes will be made, I think painting it as such a doom and gloom situation is not doing the positive sides of it much justice. So proceed with caution.
I vote for the danger zone.
Okay, a split jury, but fortunately we will have 4 humans back on next week. I want to thank you, Richard Verly, Sarah Bertelsen, Elsa Vidal, Noor Ibrahim in New York City. Thank you for being with us here in The World This Week.